Okay, this is Unit 8 Homework 2. Now we're going to be adding and subtracting these rational expressions, which are fractions. We're adding and subtracting fractions. We're going to do it the same way we've done it with numbers. It's obviously a little trickier when we don't have numbers for these variables because we have to follow some of our properties that we've already learned about in terms of how to rewrite with a common denominator and then combine them and simplify like we did yesterday. All right, so the first one here, we've already got a common denominator, 4a squared and 4a squared, so we can just add the tops together. All right, we can jump down to step 2, combining the numerators, and keep the same common denominator. The common denominator is 4a squared, and the top is going to be 18a. Okay, now we simplify like we did yesterday, where we do want to simplify these variables. So one of these a's cancel with one of these, leaving one left. And let's see, 2 goes into 18 9 times, and 2 goes into 4 twice. So we end up with 9 over 2a as our final answer. So it's pretty straightforward when you have a common denominator. Like, let's jump down to number 4. Same thing, you know, you got a common denominator, 12a minus 3. So you just subtract the tops. 1 minus 16a squared goes in the top. And in the bottom, you have your common denominator, 12a minus 3. Now, this one's a little bit trickier from here because we do have a difference of 2 squares pattern in the top. We can write that as 1 minus 4a times 1 plus 4a. All right, you should recognize whenever you have a minus sign in a square, it could be a difference of 2 squares. And 1 squared is really just 1. So it's a difference of 2 squares there. And this is our pattern to factor a difference of 2 squares. And then in the bottom, I can pull out a 3, and I'm left with 4a minus 1. All right, so this was a tricky one to simplify from yesterday. And we learned that this quantity and this quantity cancel, and leaving a minus 1, if you recall, when they're switched like that. So my final answer is negative quantity 1 plus 4a in the top over 3. So I just pulled the negative sign out front. It doesn't matter where you put it, top, bottom, out front. So I can distribute the negative if I want to both these terms, but that is my final answer, however you want to write it. Okay, let's try another one. How about number 5? We've got a common denominator, so we can just go ahead and add the tops. Now, when we do the tops, we are going to need to do a quantity here, or parentheses here around the n plus 1, because we're going to have to distribute that negative sign to both terms. And then the bottom, we have n squared plus n minus 6, which is our common denominator. Okay, so let's simplify by distributing this negative. That gives us n squared plus 3n minus 7 minus n minus 1 all over our common denominator, which is n squared plus n minus 6. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to work up here because I'm out of space here. So negative 7 and negative 1 make negative 8, and 3n minus n gives you 2n. So now I have n squared plus 2n. And then minus 7 minus 1 is minus 8. And that's all over this denominator, which now I'm going to try to factor this into 2 linear factors. I'm going to try to factor the top and the bottom. I'll start with the bottom. And so I need 2 things that multiply to be negative 6 and add to be 1. So that'd be positive 3 and negative 2. All right. And then let's try to factor the top as well, because something might cancel. If you remember from yesterday, to simplify, we need to factor. So there are 2 things that multiply to be negative 8 and add to be 2. So how about positive 4 and negative 2? All right, so I'm going to rewrite that as n plus 4 times n minus 2. And that's all over n plus 3 times n minus 2. Sorry, it's a little hard to see that. But these n minus 2's do cancel. And so my final answer, I'm going to have to write up here, is n plus 4 over n plus 3. All right, number 8, let's try another one here. These ones do not have a common denominator. So now we have unlike base examples. So here's the first one. I'm going to need to multiply the top and the bottom of this fraction by a. All right, that gives me a squared over here, which I need a squared. But I also need an 8, so I'm going to have to multiply the top and the bottom of this fraction by 8. All right, so this gives me now 32a over 8a squared minus 7a over 8a squared. Now I have a common denominator, So now I can just subtract, and I get 25a over 8a squared. All right, and now one of these a's cancel with one of these, leaving one left, and so final answer is 25 over 8a. Okay, next let's try number 10. So we need common denominators. We're going to have to factor these. If you have a quadratic that's a trinomial like this, you're going to have to factor it first, because most likely this is going to be a factor within this polynomial, because otherwise you can't add them together without a common denominator. So I'm going to try to factor this one. All right, it's going to have a factor of y plus 8 most likely. All right, and sure enough, y plus 3 would be the other factor. All right, so it's pretty easy to factor those using what we learned about factoring from the previous units. Okay, so I need to multiply the top and the bottom of this one by y plus 3 then. And that gives me that common denominator that we're looking for. All right, and then I'm also going to distribute the 7 to both of these terms, so I get 7y plus 21, and I'm going to add it together. So plus 35 all over my common denominator, y plus 3, y plus 8. So I first multiply the top and bottom of this one by y plus 3, and then you got a common denominator now, so you can just add them together. But don't forget to distribute when you do that, and simplify. So 21 plus 35 makes 56. So I have 7y plus 56 all over y minus 3 times y plus 8. Now let's try to pull out a number here if we can, and 7 comes out of this. So I know I'm running out of space, but if I pull out a 7, I get y plus 8 over y minus 3 times y plus 8, and now this y plus 8 cancels, and I'm left with 7 over y minus 3 is my final answer. And the only mistake I made is this is a plus 3. I don't know why I wrote that as a minus 3. That's a plus 3 here. It was a plus 3 and a plus 3 here. I saw that as a minus sign and kept it as a minus sign, but it was a plus. Okay, let's just try a few more for good practice for your guys' homework. All right, this one, common denominator, once again, I need to factor it. So I have x squared minus 5 over x plus 2 is probably going to be a factor. So try that one first. All right, that'd be 3, and that works. All right, and then I'm going to multiply the top and bottom of this one by x plus 3, so that I have a common denominator. And so now I've got a common denominator, so I'm going to add them together. I get x squared minus 5, add the tops, and you get x plus 3 all over the common denominator. All right, and then simplify. So this turns into x squared plus x minus 2 all over x plus 2 times x plus 3. Now, most likely one of these factors is hidden inside here if you recognize this pattern, so that we can simplify. So let's try to factor this. Are there two things that multiply together to be 2, negative 2, and add to be 1? All right. And most likely it's going to be one of these factors, so x plus 2 and then x minus 1. That would multiply to be negative 2 and add to be 1, so that works. Over x plus 2 times x plus 3. Now these cancel, and I get my final answer, x minus 1 over x plus 3. Okay, 14. Once again, I need a common denominator, so I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom of this one by this number b plus 3. Whatever this number is, I don't know, but it's a number. And then I need to multiply the top and bottom of this one by b. So my common denominator is b times b plus 3. All right, the top is b squared minus 4b plus 3. If you add the top together, over my common denominator, b times b plus 3. All right, now let's simplify, distribute this negative and the 4 to both of these terms. So I get b squared minus 4b minus 12 all over b squared plus 3b. I'm sorry, I'm going to leave the bottom unfactored, or factored, instead of distributing that. All right, now I'm going to try to factor the bottom. Are there two things that multiply to be negative 12 and add to be negative 4? Negative 6 and positive 3. So b minus 6 and b plus 3 all over b times b plus 3. I'm sorry. Let's try that again. This would be a 2. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12, and negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. All right, so that works, but it doesn't look like there's anything for us to simplify here. There's no factors that cancel, so unfortunately that is our answer. It doesn't simplify. Okay, let's try one last one here. We get a factor of the bottoms first to even know what our common denominator should be. So pull out a 4 from this first term, and we're left with p minus 5. And then let's try to factor this one. We need two things that multiply to be 15 and add to be negative 8. So negative 5 and negative 3. All right. So we've got the p minus 5, but we need, well, first of all, I'm going to simplify this. So this turns into a 2. So 1/2. 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 4 twice. Okay, so I need a 2 in the bottom, but I also need a quantity p minus 3. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom of this one by 2 to get my 2. And then over here, I need to multiply top and the bottom by p minus 3. All right, and that gives me my common denominator. So in the top, I'm going to have p minus 3 plus 2 times p minus 6. And then all over the common denominator, which is 2, p minus 5, and also a p minus 3 number, all multiplied together. Okay, so let's distribute the 2. I get p minus 3 plus 2p minus 12 all over the common denominator, which I'll leave factored for now. All right, let's try to simplify. So this simplifies to 3p, and then negative 3 and negative 12 make negative 15. And then we also need to factor out a 3 from the top, and we're left with p minus 5, and now we get something to cancel. All right, the p minus 5's cancel. My final answer then is 3 over 2 times quantity p minus 3. All right, sorry, you guys can't really see that, can you? But that is what we need to do, and I hope this helps. Once again, if you have homework questions, let me know and I'll try to help. We can set up another Zoom session. Feel free to join me. I know nobody joined me on Friday, but I also had some technical difficulties with the link. So if you guys want to do a Zoom session to go over questions, please let me know. We'll do that. Please let me know how I can help, and I hope you guys are staying safe as always.